There's a dark side to every paradise. Even Hawaii. Maybe especially Hawaii. From recent wildfires to the invasions and epidemics of centuries ago, the islands have seen a lot of pain. The kind of stuff we try to forget when we're sipping sunset Mai Tais on Waikiki Beach. But sometimes, the past rises up to remind you. A few years ago, I sat in the Honolulu airport, waiting for a red-eye back to LA. I was there on a film shoot, but the threat of a tropical storm sent me scurrying back to the mainland. I peered out of the window at the shore in the distance. Waves crashed, their jagged crests lit up by lightning. I was worried I'd never make it home, and the young man sitting near me wasn't helping. He was terrified. His eyes darted around and he jumped when people walked by. I tried to calm him with small talk. After I found out his name was Cam, I asked what he was doing at the airport, leaving home or going home. The question hit Cam hard. He stifled a sob and whispered, "I don't know. I just have to get away from the night marchers." You're listening to Run, Fool! I'm Rodney Barnes, and this is episode 37, The Night Marchers. Sizzle alert! This summer, let the only thing smoking at your barbecue be the grill, not your grooming game. Get ready for the ultimate cookout season with Manscaped. Whether you're flipping burgers or cannonballing into the pool, make sure your meat looks neat with the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra. Fire up your grooming routine and keep it cool with Manscaped. Head to manscaped.com and use the code RUNFOOL for 20% off and free shipping. Let's make this summer sizzle for all the right reasons. Okay, guys, let's get to know me a little more personally. There was a time I was about to have groin surgery, and I can get a little furry beneath my waist, furrier than I'd like to be. So I decided, okay, I'm not going to leave it up to the surgeons. I went to Manscaped, and I escaped myself so clean that they could see arteries, they could see veins, they could see more of me than I'd ever seen in my whole life, probably since birth. And I felt better, and everything went well. I was clean as a whistle. And you know what helped me get there? Manscaped. And if you want to clean yourself up like that, whether it's for surgery, whether it's for the summer, you can go to Manscaped, clean yourself up, and never look better. So get 20% off and free shipping with the code RUNFOOL at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. And use code RUNFOOL. Manscaped, the perfect way to get your patties sizzling hot this summer. It all started 13 years ago, when Cam awoke to the sound of distant drums. The 8-year-old rubbed his eyes. For a second, he thought he was home in Ohio. Then he remembered. He was in his mom's family house on the shores of Oahu, where she was born, when she returned when her cancer treatment failed, where he and his dad had buried her that day. Cam heard more drums and the wail of a conch shell. It came through the window from the beach. He didn't want to wake his grieving dad. He thought of calling Malia, the housekeeper who'd raised his mom in her early days and nursed her in her final ones, but he wasn't sure she'd stayed the night. Cam's curiosity won out over his fear. He crept into the living room and out the patio door. He scurried through the hedge of tropical tea plants and walked out onto the sand. The moon was a silver crescent, and the water was as black as the sky. The drums and horns got louder, and Cam saw red lights flickering in the ocean fog. Then, warriors rose from the water. A procession of men in loincloths and ladies in grass skirts. Some held spears or torches. Others beat a driving rhythm on drums, and one blew a conch. The sounds were faint and echoey. When they came closer, Cam realized why. They were translucent spirits, only half there. They left no footprints because they marched on air, suspended above the sand. Cam gasped. The marchers stopped, and all of them turned to look at him. Then one warrior floated toward him. Cam scrambled and fell by the tea plants. The warrior towered over him, gripping a spear. Cam was mesmerized by his scarred face, and the warrior was just as fascinated with Cam, like he'd never seen a half-Hawaiian kid in braces and Spider-Man pajamas. He pointed to his fellow marchers, then back at Cam. He asked, "No?" It was one of the few Hawaiian words Cam knew. It meant, "Mine?" The spirit was wondering, "Are you like us? One of us?" Cam didn't know what to say, and the warrior didn't like that. Just as he raised his spear high, hands shot out of the tea plants and pulled Cam through them. It was Malia the housekeeper who held him to the ground. "Close your eyes, don't look at them. They can't cross the border of the tea plants, but you have to show your respect." Malia squeezed her eyes shut, and so did Cam. They lay there holding their breath until the marching moved past the house, fading into the hills. Cam burst into tears. Who were they? Was he having a nightmare? Malia felt torn. The boy had been through so much, so she held him close and told him. Maybe it was just a bad dream, but if he listened closely, she'd tell him what to do, in case he ever saw the night marchers again. Cam and his dad went back to Ohio. They stopped visiting Hawaii, which was fine with Cam. That was a place where monsters marched and mothers died. Eventually, his grief dulled. The memory of the marchers faded like a nightmare on a sunny morning. But 13 years later, a force stronger than grief or fear lured him to that beach again. What brought Cam back to Hawaii? Spring break, baby! It was March, and the Honolulu airport teemed with college kids, amped for a week of sun and fun. Cam glanced back at his friends as he led them to the baggage claim. Leading the pack was his fraternity president, Bash, who partied like it was his job. His beefy arm was around smart, sensitive Grace, who Cam thought was way too good for Bash. Behind them was Randy, a weirdo DJ who could get you any drug, anytime. And Taylor, who prepped for her Hawaii trip by watching Lilo and Stitch on the plane, twice. Cam was a fifth wheel, and Bash still treated him like a pledge. But popularity was tough for an anxious mixed kid in the Midwest, so he was proud of earning his spot in the clique. A short, sturdy woman in her 70s burst through the crowd, holding 5 leis. She put a lei over Cam, then hugged him. He realized it was Malia. She cried, "Welcome home, Kamalani." Bash snorted. "Bro, did she just call you Melanie?" Malia glared. Kamalani was Cam's full name, and it was special. It meant heavenly child. Bash smirked. "Well, I'm Bash Cook, and a guy named Cook discovered Hawaii. Guess I'm special too." Malia smiled, but she spoke with an edge. "Cook didn't discover us. We were already here. But men like him did bring smallpox, tuberculosis, and leprosy to the islands. I hope you won't do the same, hun." Bash grabbed the leis from Malia's arm and looped them all on himself. "Nah, I just came to get laid. Get it?" Randy and Taylor laughed. Grace was mortified. Cam didn't know what to say, so he sheepishly asked Malia where the car was. Malia drove the SUV she'd rented for them, while Cam sat in the front passenger seat. She kept sneaking glances at him. They were loving but perplexed, like they were parts of him she didn't get. Maybe it was the bleach blonde dye job, which Bash dared him to do at a party last month, or how pale the Illinois winter had made him, or his Midwestern accent. Whatever it was, he wished she'd stop. When they drove to a rough-and-tumble stretch of the shoreline, Taylor complained. This wasn't Instagrammable, but she changed her tune when they got to the beach house. It was old and rambling, surrounded by colorful tea plants, and with a heavenly view of the water. When they went in, the girls raced to the patio to take selfies. Bash and Randy eyed the old spears and conch shells on the walls, and Cam looked at dusty pictures of his mom and grandparents feeling bittersweet. Malia had stocked the kitchen with local goodies and tons of beer. She'd get out of their hair, but there was one rule they had to follow. Stay off the beach tonight. Bash bristled. Wasn't the beach the point of a beach house? Malia nodded. Yes, but it's the Pukane moon. A crescent as thin as the veil between this world and the next. It's a time for spirits, and you don't want to cross paths with the night marchers. A memory came rushing back to Cam, one he'd written off as a bad dream. He heard the faint sound of drums and marching, and it terrified him. He blurted that Malia was being silly. It was just an old superstition. Bash and Randy rolled their eyes and went to get beer. Malia whispered, "Kamalani, have you really forgotten?" She sighed, grabbed her purse, and went to the driveway. Cam scrambled to catch up. He opened the door to her beat-up old car to let her in, and he said he was sorry about his friends. They were just sheltered. Malia looked like she had a lot to say, but she bit her tongue and caressed his cheek. "Go have fun, Kamalani, but stay safe. And please, get a tan." When Cam went back in, a stern Bash and Randy faced him. He worried that Malia had freaked them out. But then, Randy whipped out a beer bong and handed it to Bash. Bash cracked a cold one, filled the funnel, and told Cam to kneel. On instinct, Cam got down like the pledge he used to be. While he sucked down the beer, Bash lectured him. "Cam, we're going to the beach tonight. Randy snuck shrooms on the plane, so we're going to take them and look at that crazy moon. You going to kill our buzz, or you going to man up?" Cam swallowed the last of the beer and gave Bash a thumbs up. Hey, it was spring break. A little danger was part of the fun, right? Late that night, Cam lay in the sand, tripping hard and loving it. Randy and Taylor frolicked and made out in the waves. Bash ran around kicking up sand and drinking from the old conch shell he'd found in the house. Cam knew he should be mad about that, but he didn't really care right now, because Grace lay at his side. She said Bash was dumb, and she'd rather look at the sky with Cam. In their shroom haze, the stars rippled like a curtain made of midnight. Suddenly, Grace asked, "Cam, what are the night marches?" Cam didn't really want to relive the memory, but Grace was so curious and Bash stumbled over eagerly. Even Randy and Taylor stopped making out to listen. For the first time, Cam felt like the star of the show. So he thought back to that night when he was 8 and told them the lore that Malia had passed along to him. Long ago, Hawaii's kings, queens, and chiefs were so precious and powerful that commoners weren't allowed to see them. If they got a glimpse, they had to be killed. So when leaders journeyed across the islands, they hid within a procession of their fiercest warriors, and they marched at night, when regular folks were less likely to run into them. It was an act of kindness, really. The age of kings was over now, but the night marcher spirits walked on, roaming the old paths, protecting sacred land where temples once stood, and the rules still held. If you were caught staring, the marchers would kill you on sight. Grace shivered. Cam reassured her, trying to seem suave and knowledgeable. There were ways to survive. You could hide behind tea plants since they warded off spirits. Or you could lie face down, close your eyes, and play dead to show your respect. He laughed, remembering something weird Malia said. The marchers also left you alone if they thought you were nuts. So you could strip before you lay down, or you could pee yourself. Cam grinned. And since getting naked and wetting themselves is an average party night for Bash and Randy, they'll be totally fine. Everyone howled with laughter, and Cam felt a sting of guilt. Malia would hate to hear him tell their culture stories in such a snarky way, but making light of the marchers made Cam feel less afraid and more included. Bash put his arm around Cam and told him he was hilarious. Cam basked in the love until he heard the drums. He whipped his head to the water. Fog rolled in, and he saw flickers of red torchlight within it. He heard the wail of a conch shell, and the night marchers rose from the depths once more, marching on air to the shore. Cam told everyone to run, but they just stared at the sea, confused. Cam realized he was the only one who could see the marchers. He had to protect his friends before they got too close. He threw himself face down in the sand and hissed, "Get down, close your eyes, and play dead, hurry!" They laughed. Was this a joke? Cam insisted it wasn't, and Grace reluctantly got down. She looked worried, but only for his sanity. The others weren't as kind. Bash called out to Randy and Taylor, "I can't see him," but Cam said these freaks love it when you get naked, right? Show them what you got. Taylor whipped her bikini top off to flash the night marchers, while Randy groped her. Cam heard the drums get closer and begged them to stop. Bash's eyes lit up with glee. Didn't Cam say peeing also worked? No problemo. He pulled down his shorts and relieved himself in the sand. The drumming stopped. Cam cracked one eye and saw the marchers floating before him, revolted by his friends. The same warrior he'd faced as a child came closer out to glare down at Cam. What was all this? Cam pointed to his friends and said what the warrior had once told him. Nau. Mine. They were part of Cam's tribe, so he begged him to forgive them. They didn't mean any harm. The warrior looked at him with pity, then said a word Cam didn't know. Apo. The marchers floated off on their sacred path, past the house and into the hills. Cam watched them go, his heart pounding faster and faster. Then he fainted. Cam woke up in bed. Grace perched by him and held out a cup of water. He chugged it while she told him. The shrooms made him freak out. He was hardcore hallucinating. Cam cringed. Was his run-in with the marchers just a really bad trip? He told Grace he was sorry. This visit had stirred up a lot of feelings about his past. He hoped he hadn't looked too weird, or Bash would make fun of him forever. Grace sighed. It's cool that there's a whole other side to you, Cam. A culture that's so different. But sometimes, people like Bash don't get it. It sucks, but maybe it's just easier not to share? Cam felt a flicker of indignation, but it faded when Grace asked, could she sleep here? Bash snored when he was wasted. He nodded and let Grace lay on his shoulder. She passed out, but he stayed up. Too tired to speak, too scared to sleep. He watched the beach through the window and prayed the night marchers wouldn't return. When Cam got up at noon, his friends were cautious around him. Bash didn't even force him to do breakfast vodka shots like everyone else. Cam wasn't sure if Bash was being kind or icing him out. It made him anxious. Even worse, Cam couldn't go on the hike that all his friends were getting ready for. Malia was picking him up for a duty he'd been dreading since he landed. An hour later, Cam and Malia stood in a hillside cemetery at his mother's grave. They each draped a lei on the stone, and Malia said a prayer. Then she asked Cam how the night went. He told her it was fine, but it came out too casual. Malia gave him a probing look, and he sort of confessed. He said he'd had a dream about the marchers, one where his friends insulted them that ended up with the warrior telling him, "Hapopo." Malia knew Cam was lying. This was no dream. She asked if he knew what that word meant. Cam shook his head and Malia gripped his shoulder. It means tomorrow, Kamalani. They're coming back tonight, and they won't be as merciful. She decided Cam wasn't going to the beach. He was coming home with her. He protested. What would his friends think? Malia told him to wake up. His so-called friends were vile and ignorant. Another wave of visitors crashing on their shores to make a mess. She insisted, you don't need them. You have me. We're not kin by blood, but we're still Ohana. You still have family. Cam exploded. No, I don't. Mom's dead, Dad might as well be, and sorry, Malia, but we barely know each other. My friends aren't perfect, but I need them to survive. I don't have Ohana. I just have Ohio. You can't take that away, too. All the fight left Malia. She didn't agree, but she did understand. Cam had been torn from his roots, so he clung to whatever he could. It was nobody's fault. It was just life. She hugged Cam and pleaded with him. No matter what his friends did, he had to stay off the beach, stay behind the tea plants, which the marchers couldn't cross. Stay alive. Cam nodded, and thunder rumbled. A storm was moving in. He brightened. It'll be easy to keep them inside now. Maybe it's a good omen. Malia wasn't so sure. It was sunset when Cam got back, and a steady drizzle had begun. He heard music from inside the house and smiled. He was happy to party with the gang. The door opened a crack and Grace poked her head out. With a grin, she told him they'd whipped up a surprise to make up for last night. She stepped out to show him the rough handmade skirt of leaves she wore. Then she pulled the door open. "We threw you a luau." Cam stepped inside, incredulous. His friends had decked the house out with flowers and leaves, and neon tiki torches sent light dancing everywhere. They'd made a big effort, but the more Cam took it all in, the worse he felt. Randy was DJing, wearing a tribal tiki mask that used to hang in Cam's grandparents' room. The music he was playing wasn't even Hawaiian, it was Jamaican. Bash was in a loincloth, and he ripped an old spear from the wall to grind it like a stripper pole. Taylor danced over, carrying a margarita and wearing a furry Stitch costume from the Disney movie. She handed it to Cam and squeaked, "Ohana means family." It felt like a total mockery, and it made Cam sick. With a sudden burst of rage, he threw the glass across the living room. It shattered, and he stormed off. Moments later, Cam paced in his room. The music stopped and he heard his friends argue. He was glad they were upset. Malia was right. They were vile. Grace barged in, crying. She realized the party was insensitive. But if Cam told her how to fix it the right way, she could make it authentic. Cam snapped, angry and ashamed. "I don't know the right way, okay? I just know it isn't whatever the hell you did." Now, Grace was offended. If Cam didn't know much about his own culture, then he could be more understanding, because they meant well. She and Taylor had spent hours in the sun, uprooting plants and flowers to make the decorations in her skirt. Cam looked at her skirt and went pale. Did she make them from the tea plants outside? Grace stammered, saying they'd only used a couple of them. He looked out at the yard. The protective tea barrier was broken. Then, through the rain and thunder, Cam heard the night marchers' drums. Cam scrambled to the living room and opened the patio door. Through sheets of rain, he saw marchers headed for the house. Without the tea in their way, they'd stomp right in. He turned to the others. Couldn't they see them? Bash grabbed him by the collar and growled, "No." All he saw was that Cam was crazy. Cam decked Bash. The frat king went down, and Cam enjoyed the sight, until Bash staggered up, his lip bleeding. He was about to hit back when he looked out the window and gasped. Maybe the punch to the head had set him straight, because now Bash could see the marchers coming closer. He cried for Grace, Randy, and Taylor to look, and they saw them too. Cam didn't know why Bash could convince them and he couldn't, but it made him furious. Taylor ran to the counter and grabbed the keys to the rental SUV. She was getting out of there. It wasn't a bad plan, but when Taylor opened the front door, lightning struck a palm tree and it crashed onto the SUV. A wave of glass shards shot outwards. Taylor screamed and slammed the door shut. Lightning flashed again, and they saw marchers staring in every window. There was no way out. Wind blew the patio door open. Cam saw the warrior he'd met as a kid, floating through the gap in the plants toward the house. His eyes glowed with anger. Thinking quickly, Grace ripped off her skirt. She laid the tea leaves across the threshold, closed her eyes, and got face down on the floor, following the rules. The warrior stopped, unable to enter because of the skirt. He looked down at Grace, curious, like he'd changed his mind. With a surge of hope, Cam yelled, "Get down like Grace and show respect. Then they won't hurt us." Bash picked up the spear and spat blood. Who cares? I want to hurt them. There was a pounding at the front door. The marchers must have circled around. A wild-eyed Bash ran over and flung it open to face the spirit outside. He bellowed and plunged his spear right through Malia's belly. She crumpled to the ground. Bash fell back, stunned. Cam ran to Malia. She clutched her wound and raised her hand to caress his cheek, leaving bloody fingerprints. She rasped, "I just came to help." Then Malia's hand dropped, and her eyes glazed over. Bash tried to apologize, but Cam pushed him aside. He'd had enough. He stomped to the patio door and pulled the tea leaf skirt from the threshold, inviting the marchers in. Cam's warrior floated in, followed by 3 more. They surrounded Bash, Grace, Randy, and Taylor. The warrior looked at Cam, who motioned. Have at them. The night marchers didn't stab or beat Cam's friends. Instead, they joined hands. The sound of drums grew frenetic as they carried out a twisted vengeance. They punished these disrespectful visitors with the same diseases that Hawaii's original invaders brought to the islands. Grace started coughing uncontrollably, hacking up thick gobs of blood as tuberculosis ravaged her lungs. Randy wept as his nose, ears, and precious DJing fingers rotted and fell off. Nothing kills a party vibe like leprosy. Bash's perfect physique erupted in horrific blisters that burst, multiplied, and burst again. He screamed until his mouth was too full of lesions to make a sound. Sigma Tau's president was no match for smallpox. Taylor earned a different kind of punishment. Her Lilo and Stitch costume got tighter and tighter. Her ribs crunched, her face turned purple, and blood poured from her nose. She squeaked, sounding just like Stitch. Then she imploded. Spring break was officially over. The warrior looked at Cam, then said, "No." This time, with acceptance. He beckoned for Cam. He wanted him to join the marchers. Then Cam felt a tug on his leg. It was Grace. She was still alive. Maybe because she was the only one who tried, in her misguided way, to do things right. She reached out for help. Cam's clarity vanished. He felt as torn as ever, and he couldn't pick a side. So he didn't. He ran. When he looked back, he saw the warrior and Grace. Both looked so disappointed. Cam told me he ran to the airport on foot and bought a ticket on the first flight out, which turned out to be mine. He grabbed my arm. "You don't think the marchers will follow me to the mainland, right? I mean, that's too far." I agreed, mostly to keep him calm. An agent announced that boarding was starting. Cam got up, faked a limp, and begged to be let on first. She looked a bit suspicious, but she let him on. As he went down the jetway, Cam looked back at me with pure fear. I turned around expecting to see the night marchers, but there was no one there. Well, no one I could see. But I did think the marchers would follow Cam, if only in his mind. We all have parts of ourselves, cultural heritage, family trauma, inner demons, that we deny or ignore because we just want to be normal, whatever that means. But sooner or later, we have to confront it, own it. And when we finally engage, there's no guarantee we'll get it right. It's only the first step on the march to self-acceptance. And poor Cam, torn between two worlds, still had a long way to go. Thunder rumbled, and I looked out at the storm. In a flash of lightning, I saw shadows on the tarmac, with torches, drums, and spears. I only saw them for a second, though, because I looked away. Thanks to Cam, I knew the rules. Run Fool is a production of Ballen Studios, Campside Media, and Atwell Media. It is hosted and executive produced by me, Rodney Barnes. This episode was written by Amin Osman and produced by Abakar Adan and Lead Mengistu. Editing by Abakar Adan. Sound director, designer, and mixer is Kevin Seaman. And artwork by Jessica Clogston-Kiner. Production support by Jeremy Bone and Cole Lacasio. Special thanks to our operations team, Doug Slaywin, Ashley Warren, Sabina Mara, and Destiny Dingle. Executive producers at Ballen Studios are MrBallen, Nick Witters, and Zach Levitt. Executive producers at Atwell Media are Will Malnati and Rosie Guerin. Executive producers at Campside Media are Matt Scher, Josh Dean, Vanessa Gregoriadis, and Adam Hoff. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.